This is my 33 must-know tips and tricks for the DJI Air 3. Hello beautiful internet family, my name is Dan Davis and I'm the creative director here at DansTube.TV, as well as the Fearless Drone Academy, which is the ultimate online drone course for beginners. And today I'm really excited to bring you an extensive tips and tricks video for the Air 3. The first 13 tips are located in the flight menu, and this is basically the menu system that pops up where you actually get the video feed. So I call it the menu system because there are 13 tips and tricks in this menu system straight away when you launch into the drone. So the first one is the flight checklist, and you can also format your storage directly through this little prompt. In the top left, you'll see an arrow, you'll see end mode, and then it'll say takeoff permitted. Now, depending on what's going on, it will say something different for you, depending if you're at home, if you've got an error message or whatever it may be. And this is actually where all of those error messages pop up, any prompts that you need to know. You can also adjust the return to home altitude, and the max distance. And you can also format both your SD card and your internal storage directly through this interface. So nice and easy, simple, and you can still see the video feed in the background. So very handy to have and something to play around with, especially if you want to start practicing in a confined area. You can adjust the altitude and the distance to make it more of a confined flight. My second tip is the battery information, and you can see in the top right corner, it actually does say the percentage of the battery. So for me, it's saying 71 right now, implying that I've got 71% battery. But if you press on that, it will pop up with some more details. Now the drone has to be flying. If it's on the ground, it will say 0 for everything, and it'll be a little off-putting and confusing. But once the drone has taken off, you can click on this and it will let you know how long in minutes and seconds until it has to return to home, until it's going to force a landing, and until the battery is completely depleted. So really easy at a glance information to know if you are trying to get a few more clips in an area and you want to make sure that you've got enough time to fly back. Tip number 3 is the RC strength, which is the remote control. And this is actually really handy to know. So in the top right corner, you'll see little bars and it will say RC. So this will let you know the strength of the signal between the remote controller and the drone itself. So again, this is really handy at a glance information to see, just in case that signal strength is dropping a bit too low. Tip number 4 is the obstacle avoidance, and that's on the right hand side of the RC, and this will actually let you know basically what you've got going on. So whether you've got the normal vision sensors, which means that it's actually going to be avoiding obstacles, but then if you turn that off, for example, then it'll let you know that all the obstacle avoidance is disabled. So again, very easy at a glance information. If it's a red circle, you know that you need to be mindful of obstacles. Tip number 5 is the Sattelite Strength, and that is on the right hand side again of the obstacle avoidance and the RC. It's that little satellite icon. You can see I've got 32. When I click on it, it will let me know that it's strong GPS signal right now. So just keep that in mind. If you're below 10, it will possibly pop up with a prompt for you. You should never fly when it's lower than 10, you know, like make sure that it's at least got 15 satellites. At the moment, you can see I've got 32, so fantastic. But make sure that you let them populate and connect before you even start flying the drone. Just quickly before I continue with this video, if you are in the market for an Air 3, and you're considering picking one up, you're based in Australia, then definitely check out my exclusive subscribers combo for the Air 3. Got everything you need, including the ultimate online drone course for beginners, a comprehensive bundle that's going to make you a fearless flyer. Links will be below to check out that exclusive subscriber combo, as well as some other links to check out other offers if you are based internationally or in other countries. So check them out, links will be below. Tip number 6 is the Waypoints mode, and this is such an amazing feature on the Air 3. We saw it on the Mavic 3 range, and for it to come to the Air 3 is very exciting. So on the left-hand side, you'll see that little kind of sideways S, which is the Waypoints mode. You can click on that, and then you can actually press the C1 button if you've got the RC or RC2. It will pop up with a different prompt if you've got a different controller. But you can press a button to basically fly to a position, press that button to set a waypoint, fly to the next position, press that button to set a waypoint, or you can go into the map interface, and then from there you can actually manually tap and choose all of the parameters, the height, where it's going to be facing, and all that fun stuff over there, as well as that point of interest point. So very comprehensive, and I do have videos on the channel on waypoints if you want to learn a little bit more about them, but definitely get your head around this because the Waypoints mode is very powerful on the Air 3. Tip number 7 is how to enable the FocusTrack mode. So FocusTrack includes ActiveTrack, point of interest, and also the Spotlight mode, which are the 3 3 different tracking modes on the Air 3. Now, all you have to do to start the FocusTrack mode is press on the screen and drag your finger down to create a box over whatever it is that you want to start tracking. This will immediately enable FocusTrack and give you those 3 options for ActiveTrack, point of interest, or Spotlight. And then for tip number 8, this is how you enable the directional tracking, which is a feature of ActiveTrack 5.0. Really awesome feature. So once you've gone into the FocusTrack mode, you need to make sure that it's actually recognized you as a person or a boat or a car or whatever it is that you're tracking. Make sure that that little icon comes up. And once that's enabled and you click on ActiveTrack, you'll have the option to change the direction that the drone starts tracking you from. This is a really powerful feature because you can have it at the front, off to the side, on all different angles, and it's very easy to enable. So make sure that you utilize this and yeah, just start using it with different scenarios because it is very powerful. Tip number 9 is how to use your touchscreen to manually control the camera movement. Now, this is a really cool thing that a lot of people don't know. All you have to do is press and hold on the screen until you feel it vibrate and a little circle comes up, and then you can drag your finger down, up, left and right, and you can move the camera in the direction that you're moving your finger. Really helpful if you want to fly the drone with the sticks, and then you also want to control the camera movement. It's very easy to get smooth movements with this touchscreen option. So very easy to do, definitely play around with it. And it gives you some control, very small, I think it's 5 degrees to look left and right if you do want to look left and right, but very easy to control the camera with this touchscreen interface. Now for tip number 10, I have the digital zoom option and how you enable digital zoom. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see it says 3 and 1 times. So they are the 2 focal lengths of the 2 camera systems. So the 1 times is the wide and the 3 times is the medium telephoto camera system. And then all you have to do to enable the digital zoom is you press and hold on whatever focus point you're on. So if you're on 1 times, press and hold on that 1 and then drag your finger down and up, and it will go from 1 to 3 times zoom. So when it goes to 3, that's when it's using the digital zoom. And then if you go into the 3 times, which is the separate camera system, that's the medium telephoto system, press and hold on the 3 and then drag your finger down, and it can go up to 9 times digital zoom. Very impressive stuff, but it does lose a lot of its clarity and becomes a bit more pixelated. So I like to use 9 times as more of a scouting option if I'm checking out an area, and then I go back to the 3 times because that's very usable footage at that point. But yeah, nice and easy to enable digital zoom. Tip number 11 is relating to the manual focus and autofocus, and you actually do have manual control over that manual focus. You don't just have to go with MF or AF. Again, you press and hold on that icon, press and hold on AF or MF depending what it's on, drag your finger up and down, and it will actually start focusing in on macro or more of a distant kind of landscape. So I'll show you another tip later on to see what is in focus, but this is basically how you enable that manual control over manual focus. Press and hold the MF or the AF and then drag your finger up and down to get the different focus points. Tip number 12 is located in the bottom left corner. So when you're on the map interface, which should be the default interface, you press on it, it brings up the larger map. You can then press that little compass icon and it will bring up the attitude indicator, which is kind of a compass, but with a lot more features involved. It lets you know the orientation of the drone, the controller, where the home point is or the takeoff point is, and is really helpful to know at a glance if you are facing the correct direction. So it goes from a blue to a green. If you're actually facing what it is that you need to be facing, which is the drone, it will go to a green. So very handy if the drone's flying away from you and you're trying to figure out if you're facing the direction of it. This is really easy at a glance information to know, and it gives you some other information as well, just to let you know the kind of wind inputs that are going on, and also the compass as well. So very handy to play around with this. Tip number 13 is how to enable the Pro mode. In the bottom right corner, it will probably be on auto by default. Press that button and it will change it over to Pro. Once you go into the Pro mode, you can control the ISO, the shutter, white balance. You can format your card through here. You can play around with a bunch of different options, including the color options as well. So you don't even have to go into the settings to change the color. So that's really handy if you want to go straight into the HLG or, play around with the different settings just at a glance from the flight menu. So Pro mode is the one you want to use if you want to get more out of this drone. Also, if you want a flight checklist, then I do have a free gift available through the Fearless Drone Academy's website. Just go over to their website, fearlessdrone.academy, sign up to the newsletter, and you'll get yourself a free pre-flight checklist. It has everything you need to know, and it's a free gift just for signing up. Now we're going to move on to the safety menu. So when you're in the flight menu, press those 3 dots in the top right-hand corner. corner, and it will take you straight through to the safety menu. If you haven't, loaded in any of the menus before, the first one will be the safety menu. And so for tip number 14, I have the bypass avoidance. So it might be turned off. This is the obstacle avoidance here. It might be turned off by default, but you have a few other options. You have the brake, which means that the drone will brake when it notices an obstacle, or you can go to bypass. So that means that it bypasses and continues its flight, even if it notices an obstacle. That's a really powerful feature. But then you can also go with either normal bypassing or nifty bypassing. So nifty is a little bit more risky, and there is a warning if you select it. Yeah, definitely play around with those in a safe environment and just see how powerful they are. I would just say bypass normal is definitely the one to go with. Now, scrolling down further, you will find tip number 15, which is the more advanced battery information. This will let you know the battery cell status. It'll let you know the voltage, the temperature of the battery. It'll also tell you how many cycles the battery has gone through as well. So really handy at a glance information. It'll also let you know if there's any damage to any of the cells. Tip number 16 is the aircraft front arm LEDs. Now, this is a really handy feature for a lot of people out there, because what you can do here is you can set it to auto so that when the drone starts recording, those front LEDs will turn off. Now, if you're flying close to something, or if there's a lot of reflections around, then you might notice the lights in the actual video, and it might have some sort of interruption when you're watching the video. It might be a little bit obvious, it might be subtle, but if that's something you are worried about, you can put it onto auto, that immediately when you start recording, it will turn those lights off. And tip number 17 is how to enable and disable the AirSense mode. If you go down to the advanced safety settings right down the bottom and then scroll down in this menu, there's the option to turn on and off the AirSense mode. Now, this is really handy to leave on because it will let you know if there are any manned aircraft in the nearby area. To then have a look at this, you would go into the map interface, and then there's a little aircraft that you can see. You can press on that and then adjust the settings there, and it'll actually let you know if there's anything in the area. It will warn you and start flashing and actually show you the flight path so that you know to bring your drone down if you're in any sort of area that's close to any sort of manned aircraft. Just in terms of safety, really important to keep your eyes on this one. But yeah, that's how you enable and disable AirSense. Now we're going to move on to the control menu, and there are a bunch of features in this one here. And we're going to move on to tip number 18, which is the subject scanning. Now, subject scanning can't be enabled when the drone is on the ground. You actually have to launch the drone, and every single time you use the drone, you will have to enable this. So if you turn the drone off, bring it home, charge the batteries, go out the next day, it won't save that you want subject scanning on, so you would need to enable it every time you actually launch the drone, which, can be a little bit of a pain, but once you're used to it, it's something that is very handy to have. And when subject scanning is enabled, it actually pops up with little plus icons over things that can be tracked. So it starts recognizing boats, people, cars, all sorts of weird, wacky things. And I would imagine there would be a lot of processing involved in picking up, the algorithm would be picking up on everything in the environment. So it could be a little bit of a drain on the battery. Maybe that's why it's disabled by default, but really handy to enable, especially if you're wanting to track a lot of things that are going on in that area. Just brings up a lot of pluses and makes it easy to start the tracking process. Tip number 19 is the gain and expo tuning. And this is how you adjust the gimbal controls, the tilt smoothness, which you can actually make it more cinematic of the gimbal. So it's instead of an abrupt stop, it will kind of smooth itself out and slow down. You can adjust the yaw speed and a bunch of other inputs as well. But I really like playing around with the gimbal controls here, making them a little smoother, a little bit more natural. And then you can have a look at the other settings as well. And you can adjust them for the 3 different flight modes. So regardless of what you're using, you can adjust them and set them for the 3 different flight modes. You can play around with the descent speed, the ascent speed, the angular velocity, yaw, everything. And then you can do it for the 3 different flight modes. Nice and easy. You can play around with that and then reset it, worst case scenario, if it doesn't work out for you. But I would encourage you to really experiment with that, because you will get a lot more out of the drone experience. Tip number 20 is the FPV mode, and this is a handy one to enable if you want to create a different perspective when you are filming. It basically creates more of a banking effect. So as you turn left and right, it kind of looks like the drone goes up on an angle to create that FPV style. So very handy if you want something a little bit different. A lot of drone shots can look the same. So to add that in is a nice handy little thing if you're adding some spice to your video. Tip number 21 is the button customization, and this is handy. It gives you so much control. Depending on what controller you have will depend on what you're going to be seeing on the screen right now. But you can really customize all the buttons, the scroll wheels, and even a combination of the buttons and the scroll wheels together to really get the most out of the drone. There's a bunch of cool options in here, and I would suggest playing around with a few of those. For tip number 22, this is within the button customization, and it's called Cruise Control. It's a feature that was released on the Mavic 3 and the Mavic 3 series, and it's come here to the Air 3. Basically, you just enable it through the C1 or C2 button, depending on what controller you have. Enable Cruise Control, and then that means when you start flying, regardless if you're flying, you're increasing in altitude and you're flying to the left and you're moving slightly, you can put in multiple different inputs, press that Cruise Control button, and it will lock all of those movements so that it starts progressively moving at that same rate consistently, just like cruise control in a car. Very handy, and you have a lot of control here. Like I said, multiple inputs, and it will save all of those and continue the mission. Tip number 23 is how you repair to the aircraft. So this would be relevant if you've got a new controller, if you want to connect your current controller to a different drone. Very easy to do. Just scroll down to repair to aircraft, and then you literally just press that button and it will start kind of beeping and letting you know, hey, I'm looking for a drone. And then all you do is press and hold on the power button. Once the drone is actually already powered on, press and hold on that power button and it will start making a beeping noise and start searching for the controller, and then it will connect immediately to the system. Now we're moving on to the camera menu, and again, a bunch of different features in here. We're going on to tip number 24, and this is the color mode. So in the color mode, you have normal, you have HLG, and you have D-Log-M, all really cool options. And a lot of people are going to be happy with normal, but you do have a lot more freedom when it comes to post-production with the other two options. And it's really cool when you go into the D-Log-M, you can also enable the color display assist. So instead of being more of a flat profile with not too much color, it will just give you a little bit of color just so you can see the image, but it will record the actual footage in that flat profile so that you can play around with it in your post-production profile. Tip number 25 is the histogram, and it actually brings up a little histogram interface that you can press and hold and drag around the screen and put it wherever you need to put it. But you can see as I adjust the EV, you'll start noticing that the histogram will start moving, and it will let you know when it's overexposed or underexposed, depending on what's going on in the scene. Very handy to have that enabled and just kind of see what the actual scene looks like, whether it is, giving you enough of what you're looking for, or whether it is too overexposed or too underexposed. Now, tip number 26 is the peaking level. And in my earlier tip, I spoke about manual focus and autofocus. You can actually enable the peaking level so that when you're in manual focus, you know what's actually in focus. You can go with different intensities here. You can either go with off, low, normal, or high. If you go with high, it will really let you know what's in focus. And yeah, you can just go with more of a subtle one like low or normal. But once that's enabled and then you go into the manual focus mode, it will clearly let you know what's in focus. And then you can do that tip I told you about, dragging, like pressing on the screen on the MF or the AF, dragging your finger up and down, and it'll let you know as things start going into focus, just so you have more of a sense of what's going on. Tip number 27 is the overexposure warning, and this is another really handy tip to have enabled on your drone. It will let you know, as the name suggests, what is overexposed. So you can see on today's example, there weren't too many clouds. Typically clouds pop up because they're extremely white and it says it's overexposed. But I did play around with the EV here just to show you what will happen. It will bring up all those patterns for you, the black and white patterns, but it'll just let you know if things are too overexposed, just so that you can adjust the image to make it right for you. And then tip number 28 is the custom file naming, which is a very cool thing that seems to be relatively new. I didn't actually know about this one myself until recently. You can adjust the file naming. So in my example, I just renamed it with Air 3. So it's got the usual file naming, but then it's going to have Air 3 at the end. So if you're like me and you test lots of drones, or if you've got multiple drones, you can then make it easier for yourself to find those keywords depending on what drone you have used to record. So this is just a handy little thing, might not be for everyone, but handy to know that it's there. Now moving on to the transmission menu, and moving on to tip number 29, which is the dual band auto. So by default, it should be, the frequency should be on dual band, the channel mode should be on auto. And this is what I'd suggest if you've accidentally tapped it or done something and you're kind of like, oh, which one was it on? That is the one I would suggest. Dual band auto, it means that it's going to intuitively move between the channels to get the least interference and to make the best flight experience for you. So tip number 29, keep it in dual band auto in most scenarios. And now tip number 30 is how you actually manually choose those channels. If you are having issues and you're noticing that there's a lot of interference, you can also manually adjust the channels. Now to see this, you have to literally have the drone on the ground. You can't be flying, and then this will pop up and let you know what interference is in the area. And so you can adjust between 2.4 gigahertz and 5.8 gigahertz. You can click into the manual mode, and then you press and hold on that little graph, drag your finger to the left and the right, and it will choose the channel that you're in based on where you stop. And this will let you know in real time time the interference that's going on. So if you are really having issues, you can go into this mode and manually adjust it. But like I said, tip number 29, leave it in dual band auto for most scenarios. And now we're moving on to the about menu and the final 3 tips. And so for tip number 31, you can manually check for updates here. On the about menu, you can see there's the aircraft firmware and the fly safe data. You just press on that little blue text and it will start searching to see if there are any updates. So if you do have the RC or RC2, you will need to make sure that you're actually connected to Wi-Fi or hotspotting to your phone so that it can check for the updates. So this is how you manually check for them if you need to. Tip number 32 is a little bit further down, and this is how you can reset all of your settings. This is a handy one if you've been playing around with all these tips and tricks and you're a little overwhelmed and you just kind of want to start from the beginning again. This will reset everything to default and it will restart the aircraft. So basically like a factory reset of all of the settings. Very handy to know if you are getting a bit overwhelmed with all these tips and tricks. And for the final tip, which is tip number 33, there is an option down the bottom to clear all of your data. Now, if you do click on this, it will clear the data in aircraft internal storage and SD card, aircraft logs, unlocking licenses, and other user data stored on aircraft. This is a good one if you do want to sell your drone, or if you want to just start from fresh, you can clear all of the data right down the bottom of the About menu. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, everyone. This has been my 33 must-know tips and tricks for the DJI Air 3. I really hope that this has helped all of you. There are a bunch of cool features in here. I nearly swore there, but no, cool features in here. Cool tips, cool tricks, cool settings. So definitely check them all out. Let me know in the comments below if you've got any other cool ones that you use a lot, or if you've got any thoughts on the ones that I mentioned in here. I would really appreciate it, and I will chat to you in the next video. Peace.